Oh my god. Their name is Conrad. My name is Conrad. Well, it has been, at least. My parents find it confusing to continue calling me Conrad. They tried to help me come up with a similar feminine name, but I don't really like any of the feminine derivatives of Conrad, so I have encouraged them to call me Gray. Yeah, that color. I seem to have control over the character. She's got blue hair too. That's very... Oh, that's what happens if you press A. Rather than jump, she gives up. Yeah. Relatable. So, I've struggled to figure out what game I wanted to play for befriending the internet. Because any game that requires any reading whatsoever or any real thought that I have to put into what I am doing is too distracting for me to maintain my train of thought when I'm speaking. And I've been putting a ton of thought into the way that I play the games while I talk. And it's not because I expect people to watch me play the game. There are some people who will, and those people will appreciate all of the interesting serendipitous, and I put serendipitous in air quotes here, but what I have described many times as my style of content creation, particularly my editing style, I call it serendipitous editing. And the reason I call it that is that I have a tendency to just put things like vaguely in place in a way that I expect to work, and then when it does, I just go with it and I do not alter it. So, like, if say I were to like just throw an anime clip into Vegas from an episode that I think has a scene that is like what I'm talking about. And then let's say I skip halfway in, and even though the image I had in my mind from this scene is not the one that I land on, it is an image that fits well with the like part of, let's say, a song that I happen to be like making an AMV for. And so like just because those two things happen to fit, I'm like, okay, sick, it looks good. Like, I don't usually go into any kind of project with very much of a vision of what it's going to be. I more just have like the basic thematic idea in mind. So like, for instance, with my script writing, traditionally, I will pretty much only have the opening sentence like actually figured out before I start writing. I basically have an impression of what this thing is going to be about. I try to boil that down to like a single statement that introduces it. And like, if there's research involved, I probably do the research in the process of trying to figure out like what I'm trying to say. Like, for instance, I have an idea for doing a big video on Mashimo Koichi. Now, this is not the kind of idea that I'm talking about. What is this? Am I going to get killed for walking back and forth too much? Did I wander far enough into the void to bring something back with me? Alright, sick. If I get sick of wandering around the same area, I will decide to move on, which is what has happened here. Even though in explaining this, I then had to retread my steps, boring me further, and making me realize even more so how long my tangents go on for. But yeah, like, it helps me to have some limitations. So I recorded what would have been a Befriending the Internet and instead became the first episode of a show that I was going to call Scraps. I might call it something else, but I forgot what the other title idea I had was, so it might still be Scraps. Oh. Well, I guess she was just like, I don't. Oh. So I'll tell you right now the concept I had for this playthrough, for this episode, because this game is apparently about going through a painful experience that just keeps, you know, you gain power through the pain, as represented by the tattering of your flowing dress throughout the game. You know, when I saw this game and read about it, I thought, like, well, that's like the most broad and obvious metaphor imaginable, but the game looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's a game that basically anybody could project onto if you've ever been through any kind of painful experience, right? Well, doesn't that make it perfect as a vehicle for a podcast exploring painful experiences? And it's not that that's what Befriending the Internet has been. In fact, the first episode was kind of like a joyous coming out video set to a ponderous but ultimately very hopeful game, A Short Hike. I don't know if this game will be hopeful. I think it probably will, given just the level of fucking craft and effort put into it is not something that a cynical person could, I don't know, maybe they could. But I have a sense of hope just from looking at this game, so, you know, we'll see. We'll see where we get. We'll see what we end up becoming. Oh, I can jump now. Can I go back and jump through the area I was before? Yes. Excellent. Alright. Oh, I can jump over the fucking stairs that were blocking me when I tried to go back before. Yeah. Oh. Oh, but this only led to a more painful memory. Can I move beyond it? Doesn't seem like it. It seems as though this is too painful to pass. Okay. So, yeah, I just thought, okay, well, if this game is about exploring painful experiences, why not make it the most, like, painful experience for myself possible? So, it's currently 7 o'clock in the morning. I have smoked a lot of weed and drank a fair amount of wine. And listened to music that made me cry. And tried to put myself in a mind state to be emotionally vulnerable. But also able to do a podcast. That's a pretty good cocktail for getting there for me. You know, I'm well practiced. I'm a well-oiled machine. Well-oiled content machine at this point. Except that, obviously, I've been in over my head for a little while. Like, I overscope everything I think about. And the more analytical I've become, you know, the more, like, I've written about shows, the more I understand about how good something can be. Like, you have to understand, I did not get into writing about anime so that I could be, like, the ultimate reviewer or the ultimate YouTuber or, like, whatever, I don't know. You know, like, there was no sense of, like, fame or glory, no particular dollar amount I felt I had to reach to justify my existence. I just simply was trying to understand why I like anime. Because, for me, growing up as somebody who felt very othered in most situations I was in for the fact that I was almost always a new kid. I had long hair most of the time growing up. I didn't really understand how to fit in anywhere because I had not really interacted with people my age. I had moved around constantly my whole upbringing. You know, didn't have a lot of strong family ties. just generally didn't interact with a lot of people other than my parents, particularly my mom, and my younger brothers. Particularly my brother Victor, who is, 18 months younger than me. And my brother Shade is 6 years younger than me. But, you know, my immediate family was my main interaction for most of my life. And so I didn't really learn how to deal with other people, like, seeing me differently from how I see myself. And it was really, like, terrifying and confusing because it's just like, I don't understand why you would not just take what I'm saying about myself for granted as, like, the expert on myself. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't think, in a lot of these videos, people have asked me things about, like, why is it that you focus on gender so much? Like, you seem to ascribe gender to so many parts of life that don't really need to have gender ascribed to them. And to that I would say, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I saw it, or it was suggested to me. But the reason that I fixated on that aspect of it is that, you know, I have this gender confusion that's been going since I was a kid. But it didn't start from, like, childhood because I had no concept of the fact that I was different from other boys until I was confronted with other boys. And also with girls who thought I was one of them, which was equally confusing because I didn't know why they thought that. Like, other than that, I had long hair. That seemed like that's the only notable reason, you know, like, I mean, in my mind, like, as a kid, boys and girls don't look that different, except that boys usually have short hair and girls usually have long hair. So to be a long-haired boy is essentially to look like a girl up until a certain point. But, like, beyond that, there were many things about me I did not, like, understand were effeminate until later. Like, the fact that I have, like, extremely long and curly eyelashes. The fact that I have, like, I mean, I've gone over these before. I don't need to describe this. This is just obsessions. This is just things I obsess over because they are reminders of the fact that I look like a girl to some degree. And that's exciting to me because of the fact that that's what I want it to be. So these are things I've run over in my mind. But, like, they don't, it doesn't matter, you know? Like, these particular details don't matter. But they're gratifying because it suggests to me in some way that I'm pretty, you know? That, like, I am successfully feminine. But I didn't know these things about myself until I was in, like, middle school, high school, where girls are paying attention to that stuff and saying, like, things to me that are, like, you know, suggest that these are, like, enviable feminine traits. And, like, I didn't know why that was the case. So I was just like, okay, like, no, I don't, like, none of this is intentional. I'm not doing, oh, that was not a thing I could land on. That was, in fact, a giant manta ray in the background. This game is fucking sick as shit, by the way. This is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. But yeah. Like, it's just like, you know, I just harbored these thoughts and obsessions in my mind that I had no particular explanation for because I did not understand the logic by which these things were being approached, you know? Like, why does me have it, like, in my mind, it was just, why does me having long hair automatically make me a girl? Because when I asked, why am I a girl? They say, you have long hair. But it's fixating on the tangible details. And this is an analytical point that Film Crit Hulk made once that I've always been, like, obsessed with, that people tend to focus on whatever is the most tangible details of, like, what they do or don't like about something. And this is why most internet criticism is dog shit, because most critics are basically operating on instinct of looking at something, determining what they think it is as quickly as possible, and then extrapolating based on however many details are needed to corroborate their point, and then, you know, making that an essay. And, like, as long as you gloss over everything that doesn't, you know, suggest that you are correct, there's no reason for the audience to believe that there is any difference between the media in question and the way you present it. And even if they watch the media in question with the way that you presented it in mind, they may, in fact, you know, black and white are all I see, red and yellow then came to be. We're literally in the birth moment of emotions. Emotions, I remember. Hopefully somebody gets all my fucking alt-prog references. I'm going to follow these fish backwards for a little bit. Yeah, like, I totally lost my train of thought because we went into a different world. I guess it doesn't really matter. Guess it doesn't matter anymore. See, I'm just trying to replicate what it actually sounds like inside my mind, because, you know, people say, like, oh, you know, when you get drunk, you act kooky. And it's like, no, when you get drunk, you act realistic to what your actual thinking is like. But most people can't control it. Like, they get drunk or they get high, and, like, they're not used to being that open to themselves because, like, in order to fit into polite society and do their job for 8 hours a fucking day, they have to suppress their true nature. And it's very difficult to be confident in social situations when you are suppressing your true nature, unless you are trying to be someone other than yourself. And I think that there are some people who are very good and get a lot of enjoyment out of, like, projecting something other than who they really are, or, like, disguising some element and putting on a performance. And there are other people who find that really painful and would rather just be themselves all the time, which makes it really difficult to fit into polite society if they're, you know, if being themselves does not just naturally lend itself to that, you know? And it's hard to tell the difference a lot of the time between people who are suppressing themselves and people who just are quote unquote normies. And I don't think there are many of them. I mean, the thing is that normies are a circumstantial creature. I mean, there's a lot more normies in, let's say, China, because China raises people with much stricter information control, where you will not learn things that contradict the, like, you know, things, you won't learn things that don't help you to live in China, you know? Like, the society is built around teaching you and, like, funneling you towards information that reinforces the worldview that the state wants you to have. That is how, you know, countries with strong political dogma reign. North Korea may be an even better example of this, you know? But, like, in America, there are places and communities where there is strong dogmatic thought, especially small religious communities. But if you live in any kind of city, you're going to be exposed to just all kinds of shit that contradicts whatever you might have believed, whatever your parents taught you. You know, even if you have super liberal parents, you're still going to learn a bunch of shit that contradicts what your parents taught you once you step out into the world. And if you go on the internet, it's like going into the biggest, most chaotic, most bustling city ever. And in one where, because people have no physical bodies, there are no physical consequences for anything that they do, which is just the most insane world you could enter. But even though I've lived on the internet since I was a kid, unlike most kids who were on the internet, I believed in my parents. Let's put it that way. So, this is the best way we can unravel this, I guess. I've been circling how to start this video. Was I going to go straight to questions? Was I going to address the list of topics that I have? Was I going to spend 45 minutes just talking about why this video is what it is? Was I going to, just start off with a story? Was I going to start off dramatic or poised or whatever? And at the end of the day, the only way that I could do it is just to fucking go for it. Just make sure that I felt I was in a state of mind that I wanted to be in for what I thought this experience would be. And then have the experience. And I think that's really the most you can do. So, to start from the beginning. From the very beginning. As far back as I know the story. We'll start on my mom's side. My grandma was impregnated out of wedlock and had to, I don't know if she dropped out of school. I think she did. But she was disowned by her father. Disowned. By this I mean she fled the community at age 18 with the man who she had to marry, who had impregnated her. They were from a small town in Virginia called Hillsville, which is about as far out into the Appalachian Mountains as you can get in Virginia. And it's the middle of fucking nowhere. It's a rinky-dink little town. I only ever went there once, and it was for my great-granddad's 90-somethingth birthday. I remember it was really scary because it was full of old people, like super old people, and I had not seen that, and it was just terrifying to me. But it was on like a hill by a lake, huge fucking acre of land, full of old people. Everybody in town knew this guy. He was a shop owner or something. But he was a backstabbing, conniving piece of shit, and everybody hated him, even though he was a major community member. Obviously, there was a lot of antipathy from my grandma and her husband towards him after he literally, exiled them from the community because of his embarrassment. Insecurity is the root of all abuse. So, I don't know what he was insecure about. Didn't know the guy. But I do know that after I don't know how to describe my relationship to the man who would have been considered my mom's father throughout her childhood, but who in actuality has no relationship to her at all. How do you describe that person? Especially if they literally have no relationship to you whatsoever. I ask as I hang on this ethereal Mars-like image of absolute fucking beauty. Anyhow. Yeah, my mom, when she was like 4, her, quote-unquote parents split up. So her single mom of 6, my mom being the 5th of 6, the 4 older ones all look the same. Her and the younger one don't look the same. And at some point, my mom caught on because of, obviously it gets pointed out to you that you don't look the same. All the oldest 4 all have blonde hair. The youngest 2 have dark hair, so a little sus, Oh, music. Different facial features, things like that. And particularly that the first 4 all look exactly the same. So, but they were all born within the span of like 12 years, Baby's basically a baby every 2 years. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's what it will do. This is what it's like to have a baby every 2 fucking years. and then become a single mother. It's for sure like that. But yeah, like, so, I mean, she moved all the time, had like a revolving door of boyfriends, none of whom she ever married. Just overall strange life. I won't get too much into my grandma because I don't want it to sound like I'm like smearing her. But I mean, I just want to point out that the woman had a troubled life. It's not easy to live under the circumstances that she lived under, you know? My mom described her as having been like fairly like liberal and accepting and stuff, because my mom hung out with like lots of like gay people and like went to like inner city schools and just like met lots of different people, and like she mostly fit in with like outcasts and stuff because she herself, like me, you know, grew up moving constantly, never really fitting in, like never really understanding why she was struggling to communicate with people. Now, I recently, after making my neurotyping chart, had called my mom and asked her, like, how often do you think in words? And she said, words? Almost never. I don't know if my mom realizes at all that that is uncommon. That it is not common to think almost never in words. That this was literally a meme on the internet. The NPC meme was based on the idea that there are people who have made it through their whole life with no inner monologue, and that this is like baffling to many. But in reality, you don't need an inner monologue. We didn't have that before we had language, and we were able to make it through life, which is the most important thing that your brain is designed to do, to help you do, is to make it through life, you know? So, like, if you can make it through life without needing an inner monologue, it just means that your instincts are really good, and you were never challenged by your situation to have to fucking like stop and think about shit, you know? Like, you just always were able to find the answers before needing to explain yourself in your own brain. You know, you can explain yourself out loud. And like, when I first heard about this, I was like blown away. But like, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I don't necessarily think in words. I ascribe words to my thoughts. That's what we all do. We don't have thoughts in our head fully formed. Like, we don't just like experience a fucking complete idea all at once. It's like you have this like impression, you think you know something, and then you try to figure out why you think you know that. And like, there are some people who are satisfied with the first answer they get. They're just like, oh, why do I like this thing? Answer, it's good. Satisfied, you know? Why is it good? If somebody asks, 'cause it's badass, you know? That's why. Bitch, shut the fuck up. Like, this is a responsible answer, because thinking about why something is good is essentially fucking pointless if your life is going fine. But if your life is not going fine, if there's something missing, something intangible, and you just can't figure out what the fuck it is, then you're probably coming to media trying to figure out what's missing. Or you are coming to it, you know, either to figure out what's missing or to fulfill something you know is missing. Or to try to, like, understand yourself better, basically. You know, like, you're trying to... You're watching this stuff because you can't figure out... Like, if you are not just feeling the call to action, right? Like the ideal state for a human being is that you just, like, feel ready to go. You're, like, up to it. You know what you're gonna do, and you fucking do it. You wake up in the morning, and you're like, this is my routine. I wake up, I fucking eat my breakfast, I go for a run, I fucking, you know, head to work. I do my job well. And then I go home, fucking have dinner, watch a movie, and go to bed. And I do this every day. And I know that I'm doing the right thing because I am on track. What am I on track for? I'm just on track. I am on the track I want to be on. I can circle this track for as long as I need to circle it for, because this is the track I want to be on. Where does it lead to? It leads to the end of the track. I just want to be on the track. But what if you don't know what track you want to be on? Well, then you're kind of fucked, because you're just wandering around directionless. And it might be that you're wandering in the direction of something that seems like it might be the right track, but in reality, it's some kind of big fucking weird demon thing that you're trapped inside of, and there's scary music and wind now. This wasn't the right track at all, was it? Oh, wait, it was. Turns out you did know what you were doing when you were 14 and you thought you were trans, but they didn't have words for it yet. I guess I'm just going to start answering questions because I've really kind of gotten confused about what I'm trying to do here. And, you know, we might as well just let this thing happen. We might as well just not try to force it, because obviously that's not the way to make progress in this game. Alright. So, the first question is from Lynn009. They say, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I cried. I'm 21 and I definitely didn't cry from freshman year of high school on. Can't even say when I might have cried before this for some time. In a way, it's kind of scary, as I can't even think of a reason to cry, even in some of the most stressful and anxious moments of my life now. I definitely feel these moments when they come, and the tension in my body builds and my voice flares, yet no tears. I might have the characteristic feeling in the back of my throat when you're going to cry, but again, no tears. It's hard to explain. I can't say if I've gotten so inherently good at holding back my tears that I can't stop the locking mechanism from activating or what, but I can say that I grew up devoid of any real feminine figures in my life beyond my mother to view femininity, and even my mom isn't extremely feminine, being as logical and blunt as my dad. Still, I will say I always had this feeling that something was wrong in the predominant masculine spaces I existed in. That even though these spaces weren't hyper-masculine, I always felt as if I could not understand or even relate to the boys in these spaces despite liking stuff they did. Rather, I looked at the things they looked at more deeply or through a different lens that didn't reach them, being too emotional and invested. I'd also like to reiterate that I could barely explain why I might have felt a certain way about something, and this further isolated me until high school, where I stopped caring about not fitting in at all, got better at talking and writing too. In any case, if I had to venture a question, what would you say to those that might feel trans to some degree, but have little experience in the past to point to a very clear transness or progression to coming out? For example, if a boy cannot relate to the norms of the male spaces they were placed in, yet have not really gotten the experience of being feminine in spaces to compare what they are like better, what then? Anime does a good job creating an ideal or abstract feminine in many characters and series, but are these close enough to justify any real experiences? I mean, the best advice I can give is just talk to women. In my case, and to trans women as well, but like, I mean, this is the best way to get a sense of whether you are like someone is to talk to that person and, you know, figure out what they think. And I mean, I will say that, like, you know, what you're describing is extremely relatable to me. I definitely connect to those experiences. Is that enough for me to say, like, oh, you must be trans because you also had those experiences? No, not just on that basis. Yeah, just like, for me, because of the fact that I was so fascinated with the idea of, like, becoming a woman, I just took every opportunity I could to, like, ask women about the experience of being a woman. Like, you know, at one point I had put out, like, just a message, I think on Twitter or something, that was just like, hey, if there's any girls who, like, want to talk to me about what it's like to be a girl, I would love to talk. And, like, one of the girls who, you know, was a fellow anime blogger who I knew did, and I just learned about, like, what it's like to start your period, what it's like to, you know, like, have your first sexual feelings and encounters and stuff. And, like, you know, didn't really get, like, super detailed answers, but, like, just, you know, even just basically knowing what the experience... Oh, I can turn into a brick now. That's fucking ill. Oh, this is straight Kirby tier. But yeah, like, so like just talking to girls about what it's like to be a girl. Like I would talk to girls at the lunch table and just be like, what do you do? Like, what do you do when you're at home? You know, like, just it gave me some sense of it. And like, I think that most of the girls who actually like were more into talking to me or like, you know, more flirtatious towards me were more masculine women, like girls who were not, who a lot of them like self-described lesbian or bisexual, who, you know, like would like kind of make a point of like, you know, bringing up the fact that they were those things. But like the kind of girls who would talk to me were usually ones who, you know, like were not girly. Like we usually like goth girls and stuff. And like I felt comfortable around those kinds of people because that's what my mom was like. My mom was not a feminine woman. You know, I'm not going to say that like my dad is super serious and logical, because that is definitely not the case. Like if anything, I think my mom likes sensitive guys. Like, but like, you know, she herself is also sensitive. But I think just because of the fact that she was raised in an environment where she had to fend for herself so much, she learned how to kind of deal with it. I guess for both of my parents, I never really had the impression that they like, enjoyed working so much as felt that it was just like what you have to do because that's what like life is, and that they both would have rather done something creative, but just like never had any kind of guidance in that direction. Like my mom can naturally draw really well. You know, she loves doing photography. We went to art school together, you know, and she got a degree in photography, but she mostly used it to just do like, you know, like taking photographs at like Macy's or whatever. Because like those are the only kind of jobs, like traditional jobs that exist for photographers, or like, you know, taking pictures for Santa Claus at the mall, you know, who don't have experience. And like my mom, you know, she'll go like on a trip and she'll take pictures of everything she sees on the trip and have a bunch of nice pictures, but like there's no saleable product. And I don't think she would want to turn her art into a saleable product necessarily. That's like not what she's getting out of doing it. But like at the same time, like if there had been a path ever for her that she had understood, I think she probably would have taken it. And my parents for a long time talked about like wanting to open a store. Like my dad's, you know, kind of dream was like, oh, we'll open like a store that sells all kinds of the stuff that we like, you know? And I appreciate that vision, and I shared it for a time, you know, where I thought that was like a good idea. But like brick and mortar is just like out. It's just not happening, you know? And like my parents just never had the business acumen to start a business. And like they were always trying, like my dad heavily tried to encourage me to like learn how to start a business, and I even at one point switched over to business classes in school to try to do that, because of like I agreed that this was a good idea, good vision for the whole thing. But like my parents, I am a dreamer, a visionary. I am not you know, I'm not a very lexical, I'm not the guy who's gonna fucking learn how to run your business well. Like I just am not good at that kind of thing, you know? And, like, there's a certain degree to which, like, impressionistic thinking can get you through life. But, like, what it is best for is, like, learning to communicate and to, like, nurture people's emotions. Like, you know, like, ideally, you will find a role. You will find something that you can do that helps people out, that you will be rewarded for doing by, you know, compensation in some form that allows you to live. And I think it's really unfortunate that in our society as it stands, and this is something that like you know, Andrew Yang, when he was proposing his idea of the universal basic income, the reason that I liked it so much, part of the reason anyway, is that part of his goal was to make it so being a mother was a thing that we considered a job. That, like, you know, the government will literally pay you to be a better parent and have more time with your kids because it will mean a better generation of workers. This is the correct way to think about the future and to think about raising our kids. Is like, literally, there is no point in the economy other than to hand it down. Like, I mean, I guess you can live your own life as lavishly as you want until you die. But, like, you know, if we're going to have a social structure at all, that its purpose is progress, you know, like, progress best facilitated by just having everybody be actualized better in our, you know, in our next generation. I have no fucking idea what to do right now. Like, it seems like it's just telling me to use the block power, but the block power is not working.